You wake up in a city that shakes your nerves like ice cubes. Chatter crackles at 7:03. The subway smells of warm rubber and dashed hopes. A man coughs like a '78 diesel engine. And you, miraculously, don't explode. Are they insulting you? You seem to see the words approaching like rude pigeons. You observe them. They don't knock you down. The person at your desk next to you chews loudly. The printer makes a middle finger gesture. The boss fires off a barrage of criticism. You record, catalog, let it pass. It's not cold. It's not fake zen. It's reverse chemistry, shadow in the mirror, that microscopic gap between stimulus and response where you decide who you are before the world decides for you. No applause, no Tibetan gong, just the pure sensation that your inner peace isn't held hostage by whoever shouts loudest. And when yet another "you're too sensitive" slides over you like rain on treated glass, you understand. You're not running away from your emotions. You're choosing which ones are yours. That's where invisible boundaries arise, filters of relevance, the armor made of air. It seems like nothing, but it weighs like a reinforced door. Welcome to the art of emotional impermeability. You don't turn off the world, you just stop using your soul as a sounding board. If this incipit made you smell freedom, that strange scent of "nobody controls me remotely today," leave a like now. You find yourself walking into the office as if into a tropical greenhouse of tired emotions, notifications crackling, passive-aggressive jokes walking on two legs, someone mistaking your face for a wastebasket to throw away frustrations. Yet, you don't catch fire. The words arrive, make a scene, then lose air like balloons recovered at the end of a party. You're not anesthetizing yourself. You're not turning into a pillar of salt. You're becoming hydrophobic to drama, like those technical fabrics that make rain roll off. The difference is tiny and decisive. You don't block the water, you refuse to absorb it. From the outside, it seems indifferent. Inside, it's surgery. You move the lever from "I react by reflex" to "I respond by choice." And that microsecond of clarity is worth more than an emotional survival course. It's like turning off the nervous system's Bluetooth. Others try to match your reactions, but your device is invisible. There was a guy, we'll call him Heinrich, who in 1919 made money with steel and silence with his gaze. He didn't yell, he didn't slam doors, he didn't play Cold War with glasses, simply nothing laid a hand on him. The employees feared him, not because he was ruthless, but because their theatricality deflated against him like whipped cream in the sun. His wife took him to the doctor like a refrigerator that no longer makes a sound. Is it broken, or is it finally working? The day before, she had confessed an affair to him like a storm is coming. He had responded with 3 straightforward questions, straight from a soul maintenance manual. Are you happy? Do you need something from me? Should we move on or say goodbye like adults? No drama, no hail of dishes, just the icy sensation that control wasn't in the clouds, but in his internal barometer. The secret wasn't a lethargic heart or a crash course on Zen on YouTube. Heinrich had discovered the mirror of the shadow. Every person that irritates you is a shiny surface where your unintegrated self waves hello. The rude colleague reflects your fear of being unworthy. The late friend reflects your mania for control. The judgmental relative reflects your inner tribunal that never shuts off. It's not your fault, it's a map. The insult becomes a road sign. The provocation becomes a work in progress sign. The criticism becomes an IKEA assembly instruction, convoluted but useful. If you stand there arguing with the manual, you lose the piece of furniture. If you read it, you sit down. He arrived there after a corporate betrayal that ripped his pride apart like a can opener. His partner stole his biggest client, leaving him with anxiety and unpaid bills. Instead of attacking with pitchforks, he asked the question no one wants to ask. What part of me is playing in this scene? The other's greed spoke of his terror of poverty. The other's lie signaled his habit of hiding his feelings. The other's stab indicated his potential capacity to wound in order to save himself. He didn't absolve himself or flagellate himself, he integrated. And when the shadows came home, the city stopped feeling like a minefield and went back to being a subway map with alternate routes. Let's take a case closer to your open space. Sarah, a marketing professional, is physiologically allergic to Tom's interruptions. A professional, I'll steal your speaking turn and even your breathing room. She applies the shadow mirror like a ruler to a sheet of paper. What do I judge in him? Where do I do the same? What is he teaching me? She discovers that when she feels insecure, she takes the microphone as if it were oxygen, and her annoyance with Tom is a reflection of her annoyance with herself. She doesn't humiliate herself, she doesn't sanctify it, she does maintenance. When the shadow is in charge, the interruption loses its venom. Tom remains Tom, but his voice stops entering your home without ringing. The most elegant part of all this is the gap between stimulus and response. That 1 second corridor where time becomes rubbery and the other's words aren't yet knives, just suspended objects. There you choose whether to pick them up or let them fall. Most people confuse doorbell and hallway. They hear a ding, and they've already thrown open the door, handing over the living room, refrigerator, and toothbrush. You begin to act like a doorman with discretion. You open it, you look, you decide. It's not magic, it's hydraulics. You put a valve between the pipe of the ego and the faucet of behavior. And the more you exercise that valve, the less you flood. To practice the passage, you need a seemingly simple skill: climbing into the director's gallery. When the trigger is pulled, you don't throw yourself onto the scene. You move your chair back a half a meter and watch the film. You observe words, postures, pupils, but above all, your stomach tightening, your chest accelerating, your hands demanding revenge. Interesting, you say to your body like a botanist in the presence of a poisonous plant. You study it without eating it. The longer you stay in the director's gallery, the more you understand that you are not the emotional soundtrack. You are the technician who sets the volume. And when you return to the stage, the joke comes out clean.
Maria, a teacher, had a principal who handed out criticism like flyers in front of the subway. At first, it became armor or jam. Either it hardened or it spread. Then she tried directing. She saw his haste, the pressure of the board, the fear of losing face, all projected onto those around him. She didn't justify it, she framed it. The response that emerged wasn't sugar-coated, it was mild steel, firm, clear, without hail. When you stop identifying with every jolt, emotion becomes a given, not a destiny. This is where invisible walls come into play. Boundaries, not barbed wire fences, but HEPA air filters for the soul. First filter, relevance. Not everything that knocks is entitled to enter. Anything that isn't needed for growth is stamped seen and sent back to sender. Second, ownership. Other people's emotions aren't a package to be unpacked on your floor. They remain the owners. You can observe them without having to pay the bill. Third, identity. If your axis of self is grounded like a streetlight, the wind of opinions does what it's supposed to. It blows. You bend, you don't break, and above all, they don't uproot you with a comment. There's a funny side effect. The longer you stay still, the more the reactive ones redouble their efforts. Your calm is a mirror glitch in someone else's emotional video game. You don't react, you don't regulate, you don't act like a sponge, and so they turn up the volume like desperate DJs at 3 a.m. It's normal. For years, they've been calibrating the thermostat to your reactions. When you unplug, they have to deal with their cold and their heat without your blankets. You stay there, the radiator off, your presence on. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the season. David, a software engineer with a punctured patience, entered the office every morning as if he were in an earthquake zone. His boss was ranting, his colleagues banged keyboards like tribal drums, the air was a vapor of stress. He returned home with his heart beating like marathons without training. Then he decided to build his own emotional firewall, a kind of mental antivirus you install before turning on your PC. Every morning he told himself, "Today I see stress, but I don't download it to my RAM." He chose his responses in advance. No hysterical reactions, only professional compressed packages. He stuck to what he knew, his expertise, not his boss's approval. After 3 weeks, it was as if he'd changed operating system. No more emotional crashes, no more internal lag. The surprising thing? His boss, sensing his newfound stability, stopped treating him like a sponge and started talking to him like an equal. Calm, when it's genuine, is as contagious as anxiety. Here comes the power of the psychological X-ray, seeing through accusations as if they were transparent sheets. Heinrich, the Zen steel, demonstrated this in sessions. A business rival publicly accused him of being a heartless profiteer. Anyone else would have ignited like a pan of boiling oil. Instead, he laughed inwardly. Interesting. That sentence isn't about me, it's about him. Behind the accusation of insensitivity was the fear of appearing insensitive. Behind the obsession with profits was an anxious wallet. Behind the defense of workers was his own sense of guilt. Every insult is a self-portrait framed aggressively. The canvas is theirs, not yours. Jung called it projection. Heinrich played with it like a video game. Game over, you're not the target. And this is where it becomes almost cruel. When you see projections, you stop taking them seriously. Others attack you, you see them like children with a scraped knee screaming at the sky. You can't get angry with a child for crying, you can only wonder what made him fall. This is the bright side of immunity. The anger of others becomes an X-ray of their pain. Lisa, a graphic designer, experienced this when a client demolished her, saying her work was amateurish. After applying the projection lens, she realized that the client lived in terror of being an amateur himself. It wasn't she who was inadequate, it was he who felt exposed. The result? She remained professional and intact, while he reflected in his own shadow. But beware, this superpower risks isolating you. When you see a wounded child behind every adult, you begin to feel like the only adult at the party. Heinrich confessed, "Doctor, sometimes it's like living in a noisy nursery. I observe, they scream." Emotional immunity can become detachment, as if you were studying the human fauna while wearing a lab coat. The real challenge is not to slip into the arrogance of me above, you below, but to remain human as you traverse the laboratory of the psyche. Jung discovered that the ultimate goal wasn't being invulnerable, but becoming an emotional alchemist. Heinrich explained it as a cook of the soul. Every difficult person was a bitter ingredient that, when cooked well, became nourishing. The more someone annoyed him, the greater the lesson they taught. Not enemies, but teachers in disguise. Marcus, a salesman exasperated by his team's laziness, turned the annoyance into a training ground. Instead of lashing out, he studied how to motivate without shouting, discovering that his true weakness was a lack of empathy. The group's flaw became his fuel for growth. Pure alchemy, poison into medicine, lead into gold. Of course, there's a dark side. Those who master alchemy risk turning relationships into laboratory experiments. Heinrich at times would look at his wife and, instead of truly listening, think, "Interesting, this is her paternal trauma speaking." It's not love, it's emotional entomology. This is why Jung spoke of the final stage, the compassionate warrior, not the monk enclosed in glass, but the human who stays connected without being overwhelmed. Heinrich learned that true immunity isn't a wall, but a bridge, protecting oneself without ceasing to feel, observing without losing tenderness. An angry wife becomes someone to be listened to without absorbing the storm. A stressed employee becomes someone to be supported without swallowing the storm. And there emotional aikido appears. Not blocking, not absorbing, but deflecting. Anger transformed into solutions, sadness converted into compassion, fear recycled into wisdom. Heinrich became a point of reference, not because he was impermeable like cement, but because he was transparent like glass. Everything passed through, nothing could harm him, yet he remained present. Eventually, Jung wrote, "True immunity is being untouchable. It is touching without being deformed." The toxic side of emotional alchemy is that you risk turning into a mad scientist. Every argument becomes a slide, every friend an experiment, every conversation a guinea pig to be observed under a sterile lamp. Heinrich himself admitted, "Sometimes I feel like I'm not living, but conducting a clinical trial on the human species." This is the price of clarity. When everything appears to you as a psychological dynamic, spontaneity dissolves like sugar in boiling water. You realize that you're no longer arguing or loving, but archiving data. You become the man who puts footnotes on other people's emotions instead of embracing them. One step further, and your immunity is no longer strength, it's pride disguised as wisdom.
Here Jung made a course correction. It's not enough to become invulnerable, we must become anti-fragile. This doesn't mean armor, but a living body that grows stronger every time it stumbles. The true goal isn't anesthesia, but the ability to become human again after looking hell in the eye. Jung's quote that nailed the concept was as clear as a blade. Accepting oneself is the essence of the moral problem. Accepting both one's steel and one's cracks, both one's immunity and one's vulnerability. Because if you remove the flesh, leaving only the armor, you're not a warrior, you're a statue with rusting bronze. The final level, what Jung called the compassionate warrior, is paradoxical equilibrium. You remain imperturbable without becoming a refrigerator. You stay connected without getting dragged into the mud. Heinrich, after the initial chill, understood that it wasn't enough not to react. He had to make space for others. When his wife cried, he didn't simply say, "Interesting." He remained present without swallowing her pain. When employees brought him problems, he didn't shield them, but listened to them without letting them catch on. He didn't become a sponge, but he didn't become a wall either. He was the bridge. And there, his calm, instead of frightening, began to make others feel more secure. Jung called this stage's secret move almost like a martial art, emotional aikido. You don't resist, you don't react, you don't close yourself off. You use other people's energy as leverage to shift your weight. Anger, you channel it into practical solutions. Sadness, you turn it into tenderness. Fear, you distill it into clarity. It's like taking dynamite and using it not to blow yourself up, but to open tunnels of light. At that point, Heinrich had become a magnet. In the worst moments, everyone flocked to him, not because he dispensed cotton candy, but because his mere presence acted like a beacon. Emotional storms would arrive, but against him, they would turn into calm water. Jung wrote down the final secret as if it were the end of an initiatory novel. He learned to love the humanity of others while remaining untouched by their chaos. Here is the final formula: total vulnerability plus total invulnerability in the same body. The ultimate paradox of the psyche. You can feel everything without being deformed by it. Heinrich was not a block of ice. He was transparent and resistant glass, which let light through but did not retain mud. From clinical case to living manual of human potential. Finally, the diagram closes like a nighttime subway returning to its terminus. Each stop had a specific name: mirror of the shadow. The people who irritate you are shop windows where your flaws peek out during a dress rehearsal. Stop throwing tomatoes and read the script. Reaction gap.
That second elastic band between "it stings me" and "I respond," where you can choose not to wear someone else's pincushion. Observer protocol. You step off stage, enter the control room, and the soundtrack becomes background music instead of driving the car. Border fortress. Filters, ownership, identity. Nothing that isn't useful, yours, or consistent with you gets through customs. Reversal of projection. Attacks become X-rays of other people's pain, not judgments on your anatomy. Then comes alchemy. Stop throwing lemons away. Make fuel out of them. Every trigger is a gold mine. Extract insights, integrate shadows, melt soft metals into elastic steel. Beware the sterile laboratory. If you become an entomologist of emotions, you'll miss the embrace. This is why the ultimate level isn't the glass case, but the compassionate warrior. A firm presence, a burning heart, no contagion. Emotional Aikido. Anger as a lever for solutions, sadness as a gateway to tenderness, fear as a teaching tool for lucidity. You don't anesthetize anything. You choose what passes through you and what bounces back. And here lies the most uncomfortable and liberating revelation. You are not a victim of the world's hotkeys. With honest practice, you become a stable table while others are still reaching for their racket. It's not cold, it's heat with an internal thermostat. Power isn't "nothing touches me," but I can touch everything without being deformed. The real gold is this paradoxical formula: vulnerable to life, invulnerable to chaos. Every difficult person becomes a poorly dressed teacher again. Every bad day, a crash course in self-engineering. When you understand this, the city stops biting. You hear it barking, but you hold the leash. If this lockdown has given you a roadmap you can use in real life, then support the journey by liking it to let the algorithm and me know you want more tools like this. Comment on which trigger you're turning into a workout and how. Subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you don't miss the next installments in this series on dirty but real resilience. Thank you for making the journey this far. I wish you clear boundaries, a ready sense of humor, and a peace that doesn't ask for permission. See you soon.